June 23, 1941. 0437 hours. 6 kilometers east of Raseiniai, Lithuania. The morning mist hung thick over the wheat fields as Oberlieutenant Klaus von Richter stood in the cupola of his Panzer III J, watching the Soviet town burn on the horizon. His company had covered 180 kilometers in 2 days, crushing Soviet resistance with casual efficiency. The invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, was proceeding exactly as planned. The Bolsheviks were collapsing faster than Poland had in 1939. Von Richter's tank, number 312 of the 6th Panzer Division's 11th Panzer Regiment, represented the cutting edge of German military technology. Its 50mm KWK-38L/42 gun could penetrate any known Soviet armor at combat ranges. Its Maybach HL-120 engine provided reliable power. Its crew of 5 had trained together for 8 months, achieving a coordination that made the tank an extension of their collective will. They had destroyed 11 Soviet tanks in the previous 48 hours without receiving a single penetrating hit in return. The Wehrmacht's intelligence assessments had proven accurate. Soviet tanks were obsolete junk, poorly maintained, incompetently crewed. The T-26 light tanks mounting pathetic 45mm guns that bounced off German armor. The BT-7 fast tanks with thin armor that German machine guns could penetrate. The multi-turreted T-35 heavy tanks, grotesque dinosaurs that broke down more often than they fought. The Red Army was a joke, armed with weapons from another era, led by officers purged of competence by Stalin's paranoia. Von Richter had joined the Wehrmacht in 1936, part of Germany's rearmament after the humiliations of Versailles. He had studied Guderian's theories of mobile warfare at the Panzer School, mastered tactics in war games, proven himself in Poland and France. At 28, he commanded 14 tanks and their 70 crewmen with the confidence of a man who had never experienced military defeat. His war diary, discovered in Soviet archives in 1991, would document one of the most profound psychological shocks in military history. The first indication that something was wrong came at 0523 hours. Von Richter's radio operator, Unteroffizier Hans Zimmermann, intercepted frantic transmissions from 2nd Company, operating 3 kilometers to the north. Their voices carried panic von Richter had never heard in Wehrmacht communications. Heavy tank, unknown type. Our shells are bouncing. It's destroyed Muller. Schmidt is burning, we cannot penetrate. Then static. Von Richter ordered his company into defensive positions. Tanks hull down behind a low ridge overlooking the road from Raseiniai. Standard doctrine. Let the enemy come to you, engage at maximum range where German optics and gun accuracy provided advantage. His gunner, Unteroffizier Friedrich Bauer, loaded an armor-piercing round and trained the 50mm gun on the road, now visible through thinning mist. At 0547 hours it appeared. The T-34 model 1941 that emerged from the morning fog looked nothing like the Soviet tanks German crews had been destroying. Where the T-26 and BT-7 were angular, riveted boxes, this machine had smooth, sloped surfaces that seemed to deflect the eye. Its hull was wide and low, turret rounded and massive. The 76.2mm gun protruding from that turret was substantially larger than anything the Germans had encountered. Most disturbing was its movement. Not the clanking, grinding advance of obsolete tanks, but a smooth, almost predatory glide across terrain that should have slowed it. Range 800 meters, Bauer reported, voice tight with professional tension. Target acquired. Fire when ready, von Richter ordered. The Panzer III rocked as the 50mm gun fired. Through his optics, von Richter watched the armor-piercing round strike the T-34's glassy plate, the frontal hull armor. The impact created a bright spark and a puff of metal dust. The T-34 continued advancing, apparently unharmed. Hit, no penetration. Bauer reported, confusion evident in his voice. Reloading. The second round struck the turret front at 700 meters. Another spark, another puff of dust, no penetration. The T-34 was now traversing its turret toward von Richter's position with mechanical precision. All tanks, fire at will. Von Richter transmitted. Concentrate on the lead target. For Panzer III's opened fire simultaneously at 600 meters. Von Richter watched through his field glasses as rounds struck the advancing T-34 from multiple angles. Every shot hit. German gunnery training was the best in the world, but every shot deflected or failed to penetrate. The armor-piercing rounds designed to defeat French and British tanks were useless against this Soviet monster. At 400 meters, the T-34 fired. The 76.2 mm F-34 gun spoke with a deeper voice than German tank guns. A thunderous crack that seemed to physically strike von Richter's chest. The round hit Panzer 318, commanded by Lieutenant Otto Hartmann, and punched completely through both the frontal armor and the rear plate. The tank exploded internally, turret lifting slightly on a pillar of flame before settling at a crooked angle. No one escaped. Reverse! Reverse! Von Richter screamed into his radio. Break contact! The surviving Panzer IIIs backed frantically from their positions. The T-34 advanced into the kill zone they had prepared, impervious to their weapons, destroying another Panzer III with its second shot at 350 meters. German doctrine, German training, German tactical superiority, all meaningless when your weapons couldn't harm the enemy and his gun could destroy you at will. Von Richter's company retreated 5 kilometers before the T-34 broke off pursuit. They had lost 3 tanks destroyed, 1 damaged and abandoned, without inflicting any damage on a single enemy vehicle. The surviving crews gathered around von Richter's command tank, their faces showing shock that no training had prepared them for. "Sir," Bauer said quietly, "our guns are worthless against that armor. The geometry, I've never seen armor angled like that. Our shells just slide off." Von Richter opened his tank commander's manual to the section on Soviet armored vehicles. The T-34 wasn't listed. German intelligence had no record of such a tank existing. How could you fight an enemy you didn't know existed? How could you prepare for capabilities you couldn't imagine? That evening, von Richter wrote in his diary, "Today, we encountered something impossible. A Soviet tank that our weapons cannot defeat. If the Red Army has many of these machines, everything we have been told about Soviet inferiority is a lie. I am frightened in a way I never was in France." The reports from other units confirmed von Richter's experience. The 1st Panzer Division, 6th Panzer Division, 8th Panzer Division, every unit advancing into the Soviet Union was encountering T-34s and reporting the same horrifying results. German tank guns couldn't penetrate except at point-blank range or from the rear. Soviet guns could destroy German tanks at ranges beyond effective German engagement distances. The technological superiority the Wehrmacht had enjoyed was gone. Even more disturbing were reports of another new Soviet tank, the KV-1 heavy tank. This monster weighed 45 tons, mounted the same 76.2 mm gun as the T-34, and had armor up to 90 mm thick. German 37 mm and 50 mm anti-tank guns were completely ineffective. The 88 mm flak guns pressed into anti-tank service could penetrate, but they were few in number and designed for anti-aircraft work. The Battle of Raseiniai produced the most shocking example of what these new Soviet tanks could do. A single KV-2, an even heavier variant mounting a 152 mm howitzer, positioned itself on a road junction and held up the entire 6th Panzer Division for a full day. German tanks that tried to pass were destroyed. Infantry attacks were massacred by the KV-2's machine guns. The Germans brought up an 88 mm gun, but the KV-2 destroyed it before it could fire. They brought up another, got off several shots that penetrated but didn't disable the massive tank, before it too was destroyed. For 24 hours, one Soviet tank crew fought off an entire Panzer division. They were finally defeated not through superior German tactics or weapons, but through a suicidal close-range attack by combat engineers who managed to place explosive charges on the rear engine deck. When German troops examined the KV-2, they found it had been hit by 135 anti-tank rounds, 14 of which had penetrated without disabling the tank. The crew had fought until they ran out of ammunition, then continued fighting with machine guns until the explosives killed them. Oberst General Heinz Guderian, the father of German armored warfare, personally inspected a captured T-34 in July 1941. His technical team measured the armor, examined the suspension, tested the engine, fired the gun. Their report, submitted to Army High Command on July 25, 1941, was devastating. The T-34 represents a revolutionary advance in tank design that renders current German tanks obsolete. Key findings. Armor. Glacis plate is 45 mm at 60 degrees angle, providing effective thickness of 90 mm against standard anti-tank rounds. German Panzer III and IV frontal armor is 50 mm at 10 degrees, effective thickness 51 mm. The T-34's armor is nearly twice as effective despite similar nominal thickness. The sloping causes armor-piercing rounds to deflect or shatter rather than penetrate. Armament. The 76.2 mm F-34 gun fires a 6.3 kg armor-piercing round at 662 meters per second. This can penetrate 69 mm of vertical armor at 1,000 meters. All current German tank armor can be penetrated at normal combat ranges. By contrast, German 50 mm guns can only penetrate the T-34 at ranges under 300 meters and only from the sides or rear. Mobility. The Christie suspension provides excellent cross-country performance. The V2 diesel engine produces 500 horsepower and is more reliable than German gasoline engines. Diesel fuel is less flammable, reducing fire risk. The wide tracks, 550 mm, distribute weight effectively, allowing operation in mud and snow that immobilizes German tanks. Production. The design uses welded construction, sloped armor plates, and simplified components optimized for mass production. German intelligence estimates the Soviets can produce T-34s at rates exceeding German production of all tank types combined. Recommendation. Immediate development of new German tank designs with sloped armor, larger guns, and increased armor thickness. Current Panzer III and IV models should be upgraded with improved guns as interim measures. The T-34 is the best tank in the world. Germany has nothing comparable. Hitler personally read Guderian's report and reportedly raged for hours. How could the Slavic subhumans, racially inferior according to Nazi ideology, have produced a tank superior to anything the German master race had designed? It was impossible, unthinkable, an affront to everything the Third Reich believed about racial hierarchy and technological destiny. The Führer demanded explanations. German intelligence services scrambled to understand how they had so catastrophically underestimated Soviet capabilities. What they discovered was even more disturbing than the T-34 itself. The Soviet Union had been preparing for war on a scale Germany couldn't match. While German tank production in 1940 totaled 2,069 vehicles, Soviet production that same year reached 2,794 tanks. In 1941, as Germany invaded, Soviet factories would produce 6,590 tanks despite losing huge territories and industrial facilities to German advance. By 1942, Soviet tank production would reach 24,446 vehicles. In 1943, an incredible 24,089 tanks. At peak production in 1944, the Soviet Union would produce 28,963 tanks in a single year. The T-34 itself would be produced in numbers that defied German comprehension. From 1940 to 1945, Soviet factories would build 84,070 T-34 tanks in all variants. This single tank model exceeded total German production of all tank types during the entire war, which reached approximately 49,000 vehicles including assault guns. But raw numbers told only part of the story. The T-34's design philosophy revealed something about Soviet industrial thinking that German engineers found both incomprehensible and terrifying. The tank was designed for mass production from the start. Armor plates were simple angles, easy to cut and weld. The suspension used large road wheels that were individually replaceable in field conditions. The engine was a variant of an aluminum aircraft engine converted to steel construction for durability and ease of manufacture. Every component was optimized not for individual perfection, but for production volume and battlefield reliability. German tanks, by contrast, reflected the craftsmanship tradition of German industry. The Panzer IV, Germany's main battle tank for most of the war, required precision machining of thousands of components. Its torsion bar suspension was sophisticated but complex to manufacture. Its Maybach engine was powerful but required skilled assembly. Quality was superb, but production was slow. Major Joseph Vollmer, a German tank designer brought in to study captured T-34s, wrote a technical assessment in August 1941 that never reached Hitler but was discovered in archives after the war. The T-34 is crude. Welds are rough, armor surface is unfinished. Interior is cramped and uncomfortable. Visibility is poor. The transmission is difficult to operate. By German standards of engineering excellence, it is inferior in almost every detail of construction. Yet it is a better tank than anything we have built. The Soviets understood something we did not, that in modern industrial war, production volume and battlefield effectiveness matter more than engineering elegance. They designed a tank that a semi-skilled worker could build, that a crew with limited training could operate, that could be manufactured in factories that lacked German precision tooling. Most disturbing is the implication. Soviet designers assumed mass casualties and massive losses. The T-34 is designed to be built by the thousands and expended by the thousands. Crew comfort doesn't matter if you expect most crews to die within months. Manufacturing quality doesn't matter if you can replace losses immediately. They are planning for a war of attrition on a scale we never imagined. A war where casualties in the millions are acceptable, where tank losses in the thousands are sustainable, where victory goes to the side that can endure the longest and produce the most. We designed the Panzer III to win tactical engagements. They designed the T-34 to win an industrial war. By late 1941, the strategic implications were becoming clear to German commanders, if not to Hitler. Oberlieutenant von Richter, whose company had encountered that first T-34 in June, wrote in December after 6 months of Eastern Front combat, "We have destroyed hundreds of Soviet tanks. Thousands. Our crews are the best in the world, our tactics superior, our training incomparable. Yet every day there are more Soviet tanks. We destroy 5, 10 appear. We fight brilliant tactical battles and win, but the overall situation grows worse. Yesterday we ambushed a Soviet tank column, destroyed 12 T-34s in 15 minutes using carefully positioned anti-tank guns and flank attacks. Perfect tactical victory. But the Soviet column had 40 tanks. The survivors continued their attack, absorbed our defensive position, and forced us to retreat. We won the battle and lost the engagement. This is different from France. In France, destroying a tank meant something. The French couldn't replace losses. Here, Soviet losses seem meaningless. They have factories we haven't even located yet, producing tanks faster than we can destroy them. The mathematics are impossible. The mathematics were indeed impossible for Germany to overcome. In 1941, German tank production totaled 3,796 vehicles, Soviet production, despite losing huge territories including major industrial centers, reached 6,590 tanks. Germany was being outproduced by an enemy it had assumed was industrially backward. The Wehrmacht's response was to demand better tanks. The Panzer IV was upgraded with longer 75mm guns. New designs were commissioned, the Panther medium tank and Tiger heavy tank, both mounting powerful guns and heavy armor designed specifically to counter the T-34 and KV-1. The Panther, introduced in 1943, was in many ways superior to the T-34. Its 75mm KWK-42L/70 gun could penetrate any Soviet tank at long ranges. Its sloped armor mimicked the T-34's revolutionary design. Its optics and fire control were superior. In head-to-head combat, a Panther crew would usually defeat a T-34 crew. But the Panther required 55,000 man-hours to build versus 3,000 for a T-34. It cost 117,000 Reichsmarks versus 30,000 rubles, approximately 42,000 Reichsmarks, for the Soviet tank. Its Maybach HL-230 engine was powerful but complex and prone to breakdown. Its interleaved road wheels, sophisticated and effective, would freeze solid in Russian winter mud. Its transmission was a precision instrument that frequently failed under combat stress. Germany would produce 6,042 Panthers during the entire war. The Soviet Union produced 84,070 T-34s. For every Panther, the Soviets built 14 T-34s. The mathematics remained impossible. The Tiger heavy tank was even more extreme, mounting an 88mm gun that could destroy any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters, protected by armor up to 120mm thick. The Tiger was perhaps the most formidable tank of World War II in terms of pure combat capability. A single Tiger, well commanded and properly positioned, could destroy dozens of enemy tanks. But the Tiger required 300,000 man-hours to construct. It cost 250,000 Reichsmarks. Its complex drivetrain and sophisticated systems required constant maintenance by skilled mechanics. Germany would produce only 1,347 Tigers from 1942 to 1944. In the time it took to build one Tiger, Soviet factories produced 20 T-34s. The Tiger was tactically superior but strategically irrelevant. You cannot win a war of attrition with weapons that take 3 times longer to build than the enemy can destroy them. German tank crews in 1943 and 1944 found themselves in an impossible situation. They were the best-trained tankers in the world, operating in many cases technically superior tanks, fighting with tactical skill honed through years of combat. They won the majority of their tactical engagements. They achieved kill ratios that would have meant victory in any previous war. And they were losing. Hauptmann Werner Schroeder, commanding a company of Panthers in the 11th Panzer Division, wrote to his wife in March 1944, "Liebchen, we fight well. Yesterday, my company destroyed 18 Soviet tanks without a single loss. The Panthers are magnificent weapons, superior to the T-34 in every measurable way. Our optical rangefinders allow engagement at distances where Soviet crews cannot accurately return fire. Our armor defeats most of their rounds. Our guns destroy them with single shots. Yet there are always more tanks. We are outnumbered 5 to 1, 10 to 1, sometimes more. We destroy 5, 10 advance. We achieve tactical perfection and still must retreat because we cannot hold against such numbers. The Soviet crews are improving. They use mass tactics, surround us, accept horrific losses to get in close where numbers matter more than quality. Last week, my company destroyed 31 T-34s in 3 days of fighting. We lost 7 Panthers, mostly to mechanical breakdown rather than combat damage. By kill ratio, we won decisively. But the Soviet offensive continued. They replaced their losses within days. Our 7 Panthers will take months to replace, if they are replaced at all. Crews are easier to replace than tanks now. We have trained men but no vehicles for them. The mathematics terrify me. Even if we achieve 3-to-1 kill ratios, which we cannot sustain indefinitely, they are outproducing us by factors that make our tactical success strategically meaningless. We are drowning in a tide of steel that never stops flowing. The tide Schroeder described was the product of Soviet industrial mobilization that defied everything Nazi racial theory predicted about Slavic capabilities. When Germany invaded in 1941, the Soviet Union embarked on the largest industrial relocation in history. Over 1,500 factories were dismantled, loaded onto railway cars, and moved east beyond German reach. Entire tank factories with machinery, workers, and engineers traveled thousands of miles to the Urals and Siberia. The Tankograd complex in Chelyabinsk became the heart of Soviet tank production. Built partly from evacuated equipment and partly from new construction, this massive industrial complex eventually employed 200,000 workers and produced up to 18,000 tanks annually at its peak. A single factory complex outproducing all of Germany. The Soviet production system differed fundamentally from German methods. Where German industry relied on skilled craftsmen producing precision components, Soviet factories used semi-skilled labor building standardized parts. Where German tanks featured engineering sophistication, Soviet tanks emphasized simplicity and reliability. Where German production optimized for quality, Soviet production optimized for quantity. The results spoke for themselves. By 1944, Soviet tank armies operated with thousands of T-34s, overwhelming German tactical excellence through sheer numerical superiority. German doctrine, based on quality and maneuver, couldn't function when facing enemies who absorbed losses that would have destroyed any Western army and continued attacking. The Battle of Kursk in July 1943 illustrated the new reality with brutal clarity. Germany assembled 2,700 tanks, including their newest Panthers and Tigers, for Operation Citadel. The goal was to encircle and destroy Soviet forces in the Kursk salient, achieving the kind of decisive victory that had characterized German successes in 1939 to 1941. The Soviets waited behind defensive lines 150 kilometers deep, with 5,128 tanks and assault guns, including 1,704 T-34s. The Germans attacked on July 5, achieving initial penetration through superb tactics and superior weapons. Panther and Tiger tanks destroyed Soviet armor at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters. German tactical skill created local victories across the front. It didn't matter. The Soviets traded space for time, absorbed losses that would have been catastrophic for any German force, and continuously fed reinforcements into the battle. When Soviet counteroffensives launched on July 12, they did so with fresh tank armies that the Germans didn't know existed. The Battle of Prokhorovka saw nearly 1,500 tanks engaged in the largest armor clash in history. German tankers fought brilliantly, achieved favorable kill ratios, and still had to retreat because they were simply overwhelmed by numbers they couldn't match. Kursk cost Germany approximately 760 tanks destroyed or damaged. Many were repaired and returned to service, but the losses represented months of production. The Soviets lost approximately 1,614 tanks destroyed and another 1,600 damaged. Catastrophic losses by Western standards. Within 6 weeks, all Soviet losses were replaced with factory new tanks. German losses took months to restore, and many were never replaced. After Kursk, Germany never again launched a major offensive on the Eastern Front. They no longer had the numerical strength. Every subsequent operation was defensive, retreating actions, fighting withdrawals. German tactical excellence remained. They would continue achieving impressive kill ratios until the end, but tactics couldn't overcome the mathematics of industrial capacity. Oberlieutenant von Richter, who had encountered his first T-34 in June 1941, survived until March 1945. His final diary entry, written 3 days before he was killed in an ambush outside Budapest, revealed the complete psychological transformation. For years ago, I commanded 14 tanks and believed in German superiority. Technical excellence, tactical brilliance, racial destiny. We were the master race with the best equipment, the best training, the best doctrine. The Soviets were subhuman Slavs with obsolete junk. I should have understood the truth when that first T-34 bounced our shots and destroyed 3 of my tanks. Everything we believed was a lie. Not about tactical excellence, German tank crews remained the best trained in the world until the end. But tactical excellence became irrelevant when facing industrial capacity we couldn't match. I have destroyed over 60 Soviet tanks in 4 years of combat. I survived encounters that killed most of my comrades. I witnessed the introduction of the Panther and Tiger, magnificent weapons that should have restored German superiority. None of it mattered. The Soviets have production capacity that makes our entire industrial base look like a cottage industry. They lose 100 tanks and replace them the next week. We lose 10 and consider it a disaster. They can afford losses we can't imagine sustaining. They designed their entire military system around accepting casualties and material losses at scales we thought impossible. The T-34 was not just a better tank. It was a different philosophy of war. Mass production, acceptable losses, overwhelming numbers. They understood something we never did, that modern industrial war is won in factories, not on battlefields. The side that can produce more, lose more, and still continue fighting will win eventually. We laughed at Soviet crudeness in 1941. They have buried us under an avalanche of crude but effective steel. Quality means nothing when quantity is overwhelming. Training means nothing when you face 5 enemies for every one of yours. Tactical brilliance means nothing when strategic mathematics make victory impossible. I will die soon. Not because Soviet tankers are better than me, they are not. Not because their tactics are superior, they are not. I will die because they have 50 tanks where I have 5, because they can afford to lose 40 of those 50 and still win, because their factories produce more in a month than ours do in a year. I will die because arithmetic always wins, and the arithmetic was never in our favor. Von Richter was killed on March 18, 1945, when his Panther tank, one of only 3 operational vehicles remaining in his battalion, was surrounded and destroyed by 11 T-34 divided by 85s. He and his crew fought for 15 minutes, destroyed 6 enemy tanks, and were overwhelmed by numbers. His body was never recovered. The Soviet archives, opened after the Cold War, revealed the full scope of Soviet tank production. Total Soviet tank and self-propelled gun production 1941 to 1945. 105,251 vehicles. Asterisk T-34. All variants 84,070. Asterisk KV series 5,219. Asterisk IS series 5,396. Asterisk light tanks 8,691. Asterisk self-propelled guns 12,875. Total German tank and assault gun production 1939 to 1945, 49,777 vehicles. Asterisk Panzer III, 5,774. Asterisk Panzer IV, 8,553. Asterisk Panther, 6,042. Asterisk Tiger I, 1,347. Asterisk Tiger II, 492. Asterisk assault guns and tank destroyers, 27,569. The Soviets produced more than twice as many armored vehicles. The T-34 alone exceeded total German production. And these numbers didn't include American and British tanks supplied through Lend-Lease. 12,192 additional armored vehicles delivered to the Soviet Union. including 4,102 M4 Shermans. German intelligence had calculated these numbers by 1943. Staff officers presented them to Hitler multiple times. The Führer refused to accept the implications, insisting that German quality and fighting spirit would overcome numerical disadvantages. He continued demanding offensives that consumed irreplaceable tanks, achieving temporary tactical success while strategic defeat became inevitable. The story of the T-34 and German tank forces in World War II is ultimately about the collision between ideology and mathematics. Nazi racial theory predicted that Slavic peoples couldn't match Germanic technological achievement. Reality proved that Russians could not only match German engineering but could exceed it in the critical dimension: mass production of effective weapons. German tactical doctrine emphasized quality, training, and maneuver. This doctrine had worked brilliantly against Poland, France, and Yugoslavia, enemies with limited industrial depth who couldn't replace losses. Against the Soviet Union, with its vast territory, enormous population, and industrial capacity deliberately built for total war, German doctrine became a formula for defeat. The Wehrmacht achieved some of the most brilliant tactical victories in military history on the Eastern Front. They destroyed Soviet armies by the dozens, killed Soviet soldiers by the millions, and captured Soviet equipment by the trainload. They won the majority of tactical engagements throughout the war. And they lost strategically because they couldn't win fast enough to prevent Soviet industry from replacing losses and building overwhelming numerical superiority. In 1985, at a symposium on World War II armored warfare held in Moscow, surviving German and Soviet tank veterans met for the first time since the war. General Hermann Bulck, one of Germany's greatest Panzer commanders, spoke with former Marshal of Armored Forces Pavel Rybalko. Their conversation, recorded by historians present, captured the essential truth. Bulck, your crews were brave. Your T-34 was a good tank. But man for man, crew for crew, German tankers were superior throughout the war. Rybalko, yes, you were better trained, better led, achieved better kill ratios. It didn't matter. Bulck, why not? In previous wars, tactical superiority determined outcomes. Rybalko, because we understood something you did not. This was an industrial war. You tried to win through tactical excellence. We won through production capacity. You built quality. We built quantity. Your Panthers were better than our T-34s. But we had 14 T-34s for every Panther. You needed to kill all 14 before they killed you. Could you do that every single time? Bulck, no. Nobody could. Rybalko, exactly. We accepted losses you considered catastrophic. We lost 96,500 tanks in the war, destroyed, captured, or worn out. Catastrophic by German standards. We replaced them all and built more. Your tactics were superior. Our industry was superior. Industry won. The T-34 tank sits in museums around the world now, preserved as a monument to Soviet industrial achievement and military victory. It is not the most sophisticated tank ever built. German Panthers and Tigers were superior in armor, armament, and fire control. American Shermans had better crew ergonomics and mechanical reliability. British tanks had better optics. But the T-34 was produced in numbers that made all those advantages irrelevant. It was good enough, built fast enough, deployed in sufficient quantities to overwhelm enemies who built better individual weapons but couldn't match Soviet production volume. The German tankers who first encountered T-34s in June 1941 witnessed the end of their war before most realized it. The mathematics were written in that first engagement. Soviet armor they couldn't penetrate, Soviet guns that destroyed their tanks at will, Soviet industrial capacity that could replace losses faster than Germany could inflict them. Everything after was just arithmetic working itself out with brutal, inevitable logic. German tactical excellence delayed the outcome, made it more expensive for the Soviets, killed more Soviet soldiers and destroyed more Soviet equipment than any German commander thought possible. But delayed outcomes are still outcomes. The T-34 didn't just defeat German tanks. It represented a philosophy of industrial war that Nazi ideology couldn't comprehend and German industry couldn't match. Mass production, acceptable losses, overwhelming numbers. The Soviets designed their military around these principles from the start, building a system that could absorb punishment and continue fighting, trading lives and equipment for time and space, enduring until their industrial advantage became decisive. German commanders understood this by 1943. They could read production statistics, calculate force ratios, project inevitable outcomes. Their reports documented the mathematical impossibility of victory. Hitler and the Nazi leadership rejected these assessments, insisting that willpower and racial superiority would overcome material disadvantage. They were wrong. The T-34s kept coming. German tactical brilliance kept destroying them at impressive ratios. And the Soviets kept building more, kept replacing losses, kept attacking with fresh armies while German strength declined irreversibly. In the end, the shock that German tankers experienced when they first encountered T-34s in June 1941 wasn't just about facing a superior tank. It was about discovering that everything they believed about racial hierarchy, industrial capacity, and military destiny was false. The Soviets they had been told were inferior had designed and built a better tank. The industrial base they had been told was primitive, produced weapons in numbers that made German production look medieval. That first T-34, advancing through the morning mist near Raseiniai, impervious to German guns, destroying German tanks with casual efficiency, represented a truth that would take 4 years and millions of lives to fully manifest. In industrial warfare between modern nations, production capacity determines victory. Quality matters. Training matters. Tactics matter. But if your enemy can produce 3 weapons for every one you build, and can afford to lose 2 of those 3 while destroying your one, then all your tactical excellence buys you is a more expensive defeat. The German tankers learned this lesson between June 1941 and May 1945. They paid for that education with their lives, their comrades' lives, and ultimately their nation's destruction. The T-34 was their teacher, and the arithmetic was their final exam. They failed it not through any lack of courage or skill, but because they were solving the wrong problem. They thought the war would be won by better tanks, better tactics, better training. The Soviets knew it would be won by more factories, more workers, more production. Both sides were right about what they emphasized. But in a war of attrition, more always defeats better eventually. The mathematics guarantee it.